Gene Reich. Wow, I sure do enjoy talking to MSPs, to managed service providers that create solutions for other managed service providers. Gene Reich is from New York. He still runs an Apple managed service provider. I have concerns about Apple relationship with managed service providers, and I do talk openly about that. And he really gave me a great perspective on that. I opened the conversation, of course, is that he's a vegetable gardener. It's amazing how a lot of us technologists kind of pick up hobbies that just get us away from the technology. Really interesting conversation. His relationship with his father developed through gardening, and he's got 3 kids under 5. So, he likes to have them, in that area as well. He created this solution, security solution called Traceless, where it helps identify, among other things, visitors and people to verify who they are. But it's interesting to get more perspective on that through his conversation. We talk about the MGM breach last year and how it could have been resolved with this. He's part of the PitchIt program, ConnectWise PitchIt, great incubator program with about 25 vendors. Really cool program, but great talking to Gene. Really, really enjoyed it. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. The next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. So I will be having conversations with a lot of the coaches and the finalists from 2023, and just kind of talking about them a little bit and their solution in some future podcasts. We want to make kind of an introduction to that as well.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, like I said, as the years progress, more people are getting involved, and then back to these vendors looking for a way to create a name for themselves with consistency. They need people like you, which is why I'm so thrilled that you're willing to work with me and work with us on this. So you're going to be you've graciously accepted to host these, and I appreciate that. Where you'll interview all our contestants. You're also going to interview last year's head coaches, last year's judges, last year's finalists. So you're doing all that. And I think it's important, for if you're a vendor and you're watching these, take note of this and how you get more involved. Watch the program. Watch what these men and women are all doing with us, because they're doing a lot. That's how you grow your business. If you're an MSP, watch these things. Get to know who people are and then inquire, because you're all looking to have stack alignment and you're all looking for credible and reputable businesses. We're vetting them out for you. We're putting them on display for you. Watch them, ask questions, find out, do your due diligence. Don't wait until IT Nation Connect to see you like at a booth and then buy 5 or 6 different technologies that you don't need.
So 2024 PitchIt, ConnectWise PitchIt. What's new and exciting about it?
Oh my Lord. So for those that have not followed any of this, I took over the PitchIt program 2 years ago, and we've had such great success, with like really great success. It's become one of the most predominant programs in the space now. Matter of fact, I was doing some research the other day, and about 5 or 6 other pitching things have spun off from mine and from ConnectWise PitchIt with other people that are running it. So it's great to see, because I think it's the thing about Pitch It is it's all about innovation. It's all about being daring and willing to do things, right? I mean, as an entrepreneur, it's a scary situation. You have to be ignorantly optimistic, and you have to be willing to maybe fail a lot more than you'll succeed, and you have to have very thick skin. But you
Mm.
always have to be innovative and creative. So it's nice to see that this has spun off into other groups that have started doing it, because I think the hardest challenge for most startup vendors is getting their name out there, right? Getting people to know that they exist. And the reality of it is, you can't just be there one time. You have to show consistency. You have to be in there for the long haul,
Mm.
for the partners to really be able for you to establish credibility, right? Because there's been plenty of fly by night businesses that have came out big and gone in 6 months. And for partners, their whole business is built around these vendors, these products. So they're making lifelong business decisions off of these.
Mm.
So it's great, it's exciting, but back to the program itself, it's jumped leaps and bounds. It went from being just a competition where they picked a few people, a few really good product companies to pitch at live at IT Nation Connect, to where we turn into an accelerated incubator program it's a season. It's literally a competitive season now at this point.
Mm.
And went from 5 or 7 or maybe even 10 vendors that are involved until they narrowed down to 3, to 2 years ago was 18. Last year was 26.
Wow.
And we had way more applications than that. That was just the ones that we thought were the best fit.
Hmm.
So yeah, we're getting ready to put out the press release in a couple of days, because then the application process will start February 1st. So I recommend anybody from around the entire globe to apply. We've had over just last year alone 6 different countries represented, between the U.S., Canada, to Israel, to Australia, to New Zealand, to the U.K. They all involved in this competition.
Gene Rich, thank you so much for your time today. Very, very excited to talk to you. What is it about vegetable gardening that attracts you?
Oh man, that's an interesting question. It's actually pretty funny because we all I don't know. Are you a parent?
I am.
Okay, so what I realized as I get older and have kids who are getting older, that you are just trying your hardest as a parent, right? You're giving it everything you got, and most of the time it doesn't feel like that's even close to enough, right? Whether it's your kids demanding stuff, work priorities, personal life, relationships. And so what was funny is, growing up, my dad was very much a gardener,
Hmm.
and it was kind of part of our life. We always had vegetables in the summer, and we preserved stuff for the winter. And I think a lot of people his age grew up that way, and that was kind of a way of life. And his way of bonding with me was always having me in the garden, but it wasn't doing fun stuff. There was no like, hey, this is a really cool thing. Check this out. It was like, okay, go pick all those weeds over there. Um, can you handle all this cleanup? I just made a big mess, and grunt work type stuff. And I guess that
Hmm.
was my training wheels. And I kind of didn't like it, I think, as a young adult. And then, I just kind of circled back with my then friend, now wife, in Brooklyn, doing some gardening. I was also helping a friend, and it was a way of connecting with people, and just figured that was actually something, as I'd given it a big break, and it's actually something I yearn for now,
Mm.
which was the opposite of when I was a kid. I hated it. And
Mm.
so, um, that's kind of where I found myself. And I think that you know, there are, there's a lot of systemic health problems in this country with that's just attributed by the food that we
Yeah.
consume. We have a lot of, we're great in this country with capitalism. We're the experts at
Sure.
profit machines.
Yeah.
And I think that that's given way for larger companies to provide a scale, which is, again, like the perspective that people had, after a war, was, industrializing everything, which provided food for people who maybe were starving. And, I see both sides of it, but unfortunately, um, the options, even at nice grocery stores, it's not the same. Right. And
Mm.
so for me, that's actually like what is wealth and what's luxury for me, being able to provide for my family very nutritious food and link a very deep connection to growing food and consuming food and
Mm.
understanding why that's important. I think that's like a bigger calling that I'll probably spend more time on in the later years of my life after this MSP industry. It's almost been 20 years for me in this space.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, so I think that and the kids love it. It's very peaceful for me. I always joke that I'll be the reformed IT guy using a flip phone and
Hmm.
borrowing my wife's laptop. That's kind of like, my neighbors where we live in New York have flip phones, and I'm kind of jealous. Like, I'm very envious of
Right.
them for that kind of like social protection. And now, of course, you see startups selling dumb phones,
Right.
right? Uh, so I don't know. We'll see, but and it's very similar actually to being an entrepreneur where you do things and you're not going to really, especially planting like fruit and nut trees. It's like you plant stuff and you don't really have expectation of yielding a harvest for 4 to 7 years, depending on
Mm.
how big you get the trees and your ability to nurture them. And so there's a lot of overlap I've found in patience and yeah, yeah. So for me, that's super huge part of my life.
Are your children it? Are your children enjoying it as you kind of did with your father? The gardening?
They're young. I mean, our oldest kid is 5, so I think that I try to include them in what's going on, but also allow them to carve the boundaries,
Hmm.
right? So, hey, if you're really interested in doing this project and then 10 minutes later you lose interest, like, I'm okay with that, right?
Hmm.
Because this is actually my thing, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, there's nothing like seeing 2, 3 year olds, picking tomatoes or eating unripened fruit because they just are like out picking stuff, berries and whatever. It's pretty immersive. So, I think that they really have an appreciation for it uh, in their own way, and I think that would be pretty common for most little kids, like
Mm.
going to pick raspberries or something that tastes good, and they're picking wild strawberries. It's just like it's something that I think a lot of people like, and I think it also ties them to nature, which I think is a really important
Mm.
uh, thing. And everyone has choices, so none of this is meant. If you don't do this or this is not important, it's of course not a criticism. But I think that like my wife and I, our goal is to really raise kids that have a deep connection to nature, and that takes effort and thoughtful purpose, and we're trying to include them in these things.
It is important, especially, living in Brooklyn where, there's lots of concrete and there's lots of, city, just kind of returning back. My father had a garden ever since I was a child. He's an Italian immigrant. We were in New Haven, by the way, just north of you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I can remember vividly, picking tomatoes and peppers and just gaining fondness for that. But Gene, there's just, kind of getting out to the garden and digging and planting and trimming. I mean, you're kind of off the grid a bit. You talked about that with
Yeah.
the dead phones or the simple phones and just, yeah, returning to nature. It's just so rewarding, it would seem.
Yeah, and now we're actually in Newburgh, so we're a little bit north of
Ah,
you now,
yes.
right off of
Yeah.
84 there. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so we have like a larger parcel of land and a much
Yes.
larger garden space, and we're moving to that hopefully in August, which
Yeah.
is only a few days away. I looked at the calendar today and realized
Yeah,
that
that's a good point.
where we're moving to might not completely be finished the way we need it, but
Mm.
we'll move in August. That's quite exciting.
Yeah, I always I love to cook, Gene, and so I just it's amazing that the hobbies we choose that's like want to take us away from technology. I love the idea of just going into the kitchen. It's clean or relatively clean. And I pull the ingredients out. I start cooking, I start sauteing, I start feeding people. I eat a little bit, I clean as you go.
Mhm.
We're all eating, we finish eating, I clean, I put everything away, and then I leave that kitchen the way I found it. There's very little in my career that I get to see a project from beginning to end like that.
Yeah.
I don't have the phone with me, and there's people there and there's food, and it's so rewarding.
Yeah, it's funny because people would say to me earlier, like, "Wow, you really like cooking. You're good at cooking. What's up with this? Why do you love cooking so much?" And I'm like, "Well, because I love eating, right?" And
That's
then people are like, "Oh, why do you love gardening?" Well, because I love cooking and I love eating, right? And so there's a very deep relationship to that as well, in my interest of all of that. It just hits different, man. You're getting
yes.
veggies that you grew. It's just, I mean, I had a friend who
Mm.
really like similar value set as us, and I told them, I said, "Hey, have you ever had a tomato that was partially rotted because you missed it for a day, and it's hot because it's 90 degrees out and it's been baking in the sun, and you cut off that rotted piece and you just have like this warm tomato with a little bit of salt. Do you know
Mm.
what that tastes like?" He's like, "I don't even know what you're talking." He's like,
Heaven, heaven.
and it's incredible.
It's
It's like
incredible. Yeah.
it's an incredible experience
Yeah.
of, oh, that's what that shit that
Yeah.
should
That's
taste
what
like.
it is.
That's amazing, right? So it's yeah, it's super fun. As you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about it. So
And the other thing is, the reason why I like cooking over baking, for example, is that too much that I do, certainly in technology, is so much kind of science. It's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. Whereas cooking is just, it's very artful to be. Oftentimes I finish cooking and like, oh, that's great. What was in it? I forgot. I forgot how much I put in because I just did it to taste. And I saw the ingredients in the refrigerator and I used them. And so now I don't know, I just kind of made this painting, I guess. And
yeah.
whereas baking, it's this much ingredients, this temperature for this long. Cooking, it just seems a little more artful to me.
Do you have like a whimsical answer when somebody's like, "Oh, Joe, this is delicious. What's the recipe?" What do you tell people? I have my own answer, but I'm curious as another person who has the same thing.
I say great ingredients. Take my time with the
Right.
ingredients. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There is no recipe. Just find
Yeah.
the good ingredients.
It's all in here. Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I make a marinara, I only use San Marzano tomatoes. I try to,
Yeah.
get as much organic fruit and vegetables as I can. And it's really, really rewarding. Gene, is Apple fair to MSPs?
As a company,
Yeah,
sure.
they like
I, you
them.
know, I yeah. I mean, I think you're talking to somebody who's spent their entire career with that company,
Yeah, I know.
so I may have a loaded answer. I think that there's if I were to look back in my entire career, MSP or a software vendor, and I think that this has been part of our our interest in being thoughtful to other MSPs as customers. Now that I'm providing software for people like me,
Mm,
um, if there's one thing that I would just say, like, "Hey, that was a good run for 20 years or whatever." What would you not wish you didn't like if you could go back and not deal with one thing, right? Because every job, like my mom said, is like, look, like, you don't have to like doing your laundry, but you need to do it, right?
mm,
It's like, okay, that's a pretty good one, Mom. You're
mm,
right. I can't really argue that. And so I've hated dealing with vendors, right? It's been literally the bane of my existence, and I think
hmm.
a lot of MSPs are paid and brought in because vendors don't do their jobs. How many times do MSPs find people who are on solutions that don't work, right, as advertised, or they're misconfigured and the vendor didn't really have the aptitude to call that out or to provide a way that had less friction around the solutions. And so, you know, whether it's Apple or Microsoft or Google, whatever, they all have their quirks and caveats that you need to understand and work around, right? So, I think Microsoft, it's really interesting because the market caps of those two companies very similar, right?
Yeah.
But what they do is quite different. But there are some very big overlaps, and I think that um, the way that Microsoft has leaned on partners and needed them to scale their business and how they bill. I mean, even like Google, for example, in their workspace product recently has capped margins after a certain period of time, and they've capped transfer. So if you sell
Hmm.
somebody Google and I'm now the MSP and I take that account over, I get a very low margin. But Google's just like, hey, this is the deal. No, there's no ifs, and or buts. And I think that that's, you know,
Hmm.
like, so Microsoft has traditionally championed embracing and supporting the channel because they had to. And um, they also have a lot of other business applications and complexities around their solutions that really require like a middle tier consultant, right? I think Apple has always had a program, and Apple has a very specific way about it, the way that it works, right? I mean, I think a, a lot of people didn't like when they removed CD-ROMs, right? And they're like, and even our customers, I didn't care, I didn't need it, but like
Mm.
our customers, like, oh, I'm like now I got to buy all these like external things that plug in with USB, and a year after that, no one cared because
Mm.
they're like, oh
Mm.
yeah, we don't need CD-ROMs. And then it was the same with USB, right? Oh, now I have to not I have to buy all these dongles and adapters, and now no one cares, right? And I think that um, they have a vision of how they want things to be, and that is that company. And I think that there's a lot of upside, and there's a lot of challenges as well that come with that, whether you're a consumer to Apple's product or not. But I mean, it's pretty hard to service hundreds of millions of people, right? I mean, think about like, okay, you got to make a product and it's got to work for a few hundred million people.
Mm.
I mean, that's like a just think about that,
Yeah.
right? Wow, how do you do that, right? I don't know, something there. So it's been interesting. I think the tool landscape has evolved greatly, right? That was like a lot of the earlier challenges was not like Apple, it's the vendors around Apple, and
Mm.
do they actually work with? Do they invest the time and resource to do things in the way that is best practices in Apple? And Apple's very agile, so they've recently in the last 4 years changed a lot of core OS stuff, and it's been challenging for developers. And this is what I mean about like, hey, this is the way we do things. Get on board because next version there's no other option,
Mm.
and um, there's pros and cons to that.
Do you still have the MSP point, Gene?
Yeah, I'm involved there.
You still run it? You still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. We're working. We have a great management team that's there, and I'm really proud of those people, and they're doing wonderful work. I think that the goal is that I'm not as involved,
Mm.
and that's just like every person needs a succession plan, and I have one as well, and I think it's I'm grateful that that's the way my life has unfolded.
Mm.
And yeah, and I don't. Did you have an MSP, Joe? Just if
I
I can't.
certainly did. So that brings me to my point. So you still have a relationship with Apple. When I looked at, I sold I exited in 2019. When I looked at Apple, I mean, they were not channel friendly at all, Gene. I mean, they
Mhm.
were like margins were 1%, and maybe two, and it just seems like a B2C, a business to consumer product. So we were
Yeah.
really turned off by everything, and plus the stores that they have compete, in the malls and everything. So I mean, so I just kind of grown. So my colleagues grown to the I don't know, to the conclusion that Apple just is not MSP friendly, but you would disagree.
Well, I mean, I think that the to all your friends who hate Apple, my door's open for new business inquiries. I'm happy to hand them off to my team who will successfully,
Mm.
you know, support that relationship with the customer and their devices. Um, I think that the traditional models have changed. And I think Apple was pretty early. I don't know if it was purposeful, but they were very early on how they facilitated hardware sales. They're very, the company itself, as you're probably aware, controls the entire supply chain. So
It
they're
certainly does.
controlling all the hardware, all the software,
Yeah.
right? And so it's just a different business model. And I think that they've made decisions strategically around selling and servicing to kind of keep a more controlled
Hmm.
ecosystem. And the margins are small on the hardware side, but the resale value is higher, right, long
Hmm.
term. And I honestly think that, like,
Hmm.
we used to sell PCs as well in the MSP, and people like Amazon and CDW have kind of commoditized that. And it's
Certainly.
really hard for me to say, yeah, our pricing where I need to run a business, here's a laptop for $2,000. And they can go and search into Google, okay, Lenovo i7, 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gigabyte SSD.
Hmm.
Oh, Amazon's selling it for 1,500. Like, it's hard to hold that. What are you doing, right? Are you ripping me off? And so I feel like we've also, I'm not saying MSPs don't sell PCs and make money from it. I'm sure people are doing fine. But for me, that really changed my perspective on selling hardware in general,
Hmm.
right? One of the things that was really nice about Apple is that their MDM paradigm and not having local directory servers led to a deployment paradigm that Intune is just kind of getting caught up to on the Windows
Wow.
side, right? So you think all through COVID, they didn't have supply chain problems,
Hmm.
right?
They
I
didn't.
mean, not really. I
I
mean,
didn't
there
know
were
that.
some people who had a little bit of challenge, but I mean, you're talking like Lenovo being like, hey, Fortune 1000 company, it'll be 8 months. And Apple being able to say, actually, it'll be 3 for us,
Wow.
right? And so, the zero touch deployment and just out of the box configuration, all that stuff is really way ahead of its time. And I
Hmm.
think that that was great. I mean, look, when we had COVID, we had like 2 offices that we needed to set up on VPN licenses, which we had through Meraki, right? And the rest of the customer base is like, okay, like, I guess if you have an iMac, take a taxi home, right, with it. And then just like plug it in, get on Dropbox or Google and resume your life. And that was
Wow.
it, man. Right. So I
Wow.
think that, like, the road
Hmm.
has not been rose colored, but none of them are
Hmm.
in a complete way. And, Apple has really tried hard to, like, I know the partner people, I don't know if they'll hear this, but they've always really tried hard to embrace the program and move the needle a little bit forward every year. And I've seen progress in the last 5 years that I didn't see for the
Hmm.
earlier, like, 15. So, um, yeah. So I think but there's still people who don't want to touch it and will never, and that's fine too.
Right.
Right. And I think that that's like where I feel like some MSPs need to have a little bit level of, like, reality check, where you might have a tier one engineer who's like, I've got a Mac at home. I love it. I know how to do this. Like, if you have a C-suite person and they need to, like, have a problem fixed, that person is probably adequately prepared to troubleshoot that between their knowledge of the platform and Google. But if you're talking about, hey, I got to deploy hundreds of devices and work within security requirements, I mean, it's like anything.
Hmm.
Senior engineer is a senior engineer, and they do complex stuff, and there's complex stuff on the Apple side that people need to be qualified to handle as an engineer, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that that's where I've heard a lot of MSPs kind of, oh no, we got this covered, okay, and maybe they do, maybe it's enough, right?
Hmm.
And that's fine.
Great perspective. I don't get to talk to many Apple-based MSPs, but I kind of have this judgment, and perhaps I need to rethink it a bit. It's refreshing because I mean they what is the percentage of Apple in the business world, just of workstations and laptops? I don't even know.
I don't know. I think it's around 10%. There is a statistic we could probably Google, but I would say it's
Sounds,
around that,
it sounds
right?
right. Yeah, 1 out of
Yeah.
10. Yeah.
I think what you're going to see though is that there's going to be, you know, people got the iPhone, right? And most people, not all, will not switch. And I think Warren Buffett's got a really
Mm.
interesting quote about, even though I think he's divested his shares of a lot of Apple stock, but you give somebody a Chevy truck and you're like, hey, look, you can't have a Chevy, but we'll get you a Ford. It'll look the same and operate the same. Most people would say, okay, or a Toyota. They'd be like, yeah, fine, right? But I think an iPhone user would hem and haw if you're like, you now are an Android user. And I think a
Mm.
lot of those people would not do that, right? And I think that grip on the experience and usage of their applications is prevalent on mobile, and the enterprise is moving slower, in some cases faster, on the desktop side, because now you have lower total cost of ownership, the hardware breaks less, and you actually have price competitiveness where
Hmm.
when the M1 chips came out, you had a true, I mean, that was I don't know the last time I had an experience around technology, maybe something around AI, right? Was like, oh, wow. I was just talking to one of our family members about planning a trip. And I said, why don't you just put all that into ChatGPT? Say, hey, we need this type of thing because we have a camper. We only want to drive this many miles. Here's our starting point. Here's our destination. We want to see some sights. And then have that thing just spit out, yeah, this is your path. Check out all these places. We've kind of called the entire internet of data, and here's a path, right? But when I got an M1 processor, it was faster than probably a $5,000 or $7,000 tower
Wow.
in the current like you could. It was like they hadn't moved to that desktop yet on the M1 side.
Mm.
It was that fast of a difference. So now you have MacBook Airs that are way outperforming and out cost performing their comparable Windows side. And so now, because I think before a lot of people were like, well, they're so expensive to buy. I'm just going to buy a $900 PC laptop. It's like, okay, well, now you can buy a $900 Apple laptop. And guess what? It's actually faster than the $2,500 laptop that you're buying for
Wow.
your other people, right? So I don't think it's going anywhere. And I think the further adoption of cloud in the world will only continue to, as we go to this is a device
Hmm.
and a browser and nothing else actually is
Hmm.
required.
Hmm.
I think you're going to have that. And then the last thing I'll leave you with, and this is all the Apple guy talking stuff, but the amount of people in younger generations actually have a preference on their device.
Hmm.
So whereas when I started my job and when you started your MSP, you came to work and you got a computer and that was okay, I have a computer, I'll do my job, right? No
Yeah.
one cared. But now people actually have emotional attachment to caring, right? Hey, I want to work here. I want to be treated nicely. I want good benefits and I want a device. I don't want to work on a PC, right? And so I think Apple was pretty good in the education play.
Hmm.
And while some of that market share I think is getting consumed with Google
Chrome. Yeah.
hardware due to even lower cost stuff.
Right.
I think a lot of people graduating colleges have a very high percentage of I use an Apple device for my life and I want that in my work life.
Hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a loyalty there. You see when the new versions come on, the people, getting up in the morning at the Apple store, and
Yeah.
it's just with all that loyalty, you would just think it would be more than 10%. But that's just business, though. Probably personal would be more.
Yeah, I think that they have a huge penetration on the
Consumers.
mobile and tablet consumer
Right.
space. And I think that the devices are starting to be a little bit more utilized on the consumer side for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah, people don't even say tablet; they say iPad. I mean, that's how common it is. It's very interesting. Was there an incident at the Apple-based MSP where some security incident that made you create Traceless?
No, so yes and no, right? So I had been again in the space, especially like 10 years ago. Like we had an Apple crew of people who'd show up to IT Nation Connect, right, and be like, "Hey, LabTAC's not good enough," right? And we were loud, and
Hmm.
you know, it was also we had a peer group that we started, and we weren't the only ones, but we were a tight group of people, and that kind of led ConnectWise asking like, hey, we need some help with our iOS development. Can you get us introduced? And of course, that's an easy one to ask for. Hey, you know, this company wants to make sure that their iPhone users get a better experience in developing products. You know, that's something where Apple's very much interested in supporting, especially this is like early day iOS stuff, right? And I actually got invited to something that Arnie put together called CISO Think Tank, and it was really fun. I mean, that was probably one of the most fun uh, times of my career
Hmm.
because I wasn't just focusing on clients and running a business. I was in a room with other peers that when we're talking about
That's great.
cybersecurity and what it meant and what it's going to be. And, you know, shout out to Andrew Morgan for including me on that list of invites. And, you know, it was with in that space where I realized we had some vulnerabilities that uh, I didn't believe were as big as they were prior to that. The way I talk about it is like you're on a hike, you're like, this is incredible. You feel super safe. And then you get to an edge you didn't realize was like 100-foot drop. And you're like, wow, I could have died. You know,
Hmm.
like that's crazy, right? I didn't notice that it was there, but when I noticed it was there, stakes got really high. And that's kind of the birth of Traceless is really saying like,
Hmm.
how I've got these vulnerabilities, and guess what? The entire industry has these vulnerabilities, and there's not really enough people talking about it and providing tools to help MSPs protect themselves. And that was kind of the birth of Traceless was out of that group.
When
So
I joined a peer group in my MSP, I mean, it was a world changer, right? I just all of
yeah,
a sudden, I was like, these people understand because, as the business owner, I don't say everybody's against you, but nobody's with you. Employees, vendors, banks, customers. You know, it's real tough, and to be in the Arnie and Andrew is really cool.
it was
So
sweet.
Traceless isn't just an Apple solution,
Not at all. It's
not at all.
a web based SaaS company. It's totally just B2B SaaS.
And it talks. Tell me exactly what it does.
So we have general thoughts of protecting communication platforms like ticketing, and we're moving into chat this quarter. And I think that the when you look at threat vectors, there's always a period of time of rapid adoption of doing things or using something, and the void of protecting those ecosystems. And then you have hints of the threat vector starting in business and then getting to mid market and then becoming more heavily utilized by attackers because they're developing tooling and methods that are more autonomous. And, you know, I remember like talking about security with small businesses. Oh, I'm just a nobody. How is it an attacker going to know about me? And it's like,
Mm,
it's not about that. It's that attackers know about anybody if they automate it because the internet's pretty wild. There's a lot of information out there, right? And so we started looking at specifically how do you prevent help desk phishing, right? How do you protect against that threat vector? And you know, the MGM breach was a prime example last year. And then how do you protect help desk systems, right? So the Okta breach was another one that was a help desk attack. That wasn't like, hey, we got into Okta's infrastructure and it wasn't a supply chain attack. It was a help desk attack, right? And so that was like one side of our concerns. The other side was like really about how we as a society treat sensitive information. And I think that the paradigms need to be changed where you just can't leave certain types of information sitting around.
Hmm.
And I think that there's a lot of like talk about encrypted email and again, I think some of these tools are really great and have their use case, but I think that there's a classification of information that just shouldn't exist on the internet,
Hmm.
right? And it's like I think people are still kind of trying to understand or find impact with how we're looking at treating sensitive information, right? And it's funny, like at the last year, like the other large breach that wasn't necessarily in our space as MSPs, but in the government and enterprise was Move It. And Move It was probably one of the largest data breaches in the history of data breaches,
Wow.
right? So I think that those are the pillars of Traceless is like identity and how we communicate, how we handle sensitive information, whether it's text or files.
So let's
Yeah,
talk about MGM. So MGM, it was an actual MSP, right, at a help desk.
as far as I understand it, yes.
Yeah. So that the bad guys called, and what did the technician do? He granted them access.
Yeah, granted them access for something that they shouldn't have had.
So the user, the bad guy, talked him into granting them access to a particular area, which allowed them to get in and hack the whole MGM system. So what would have Traceless done to disallow that?
Well, there's a few things, right? Like in one sense of the word, or one sense of this scenario, just verifying requests and verifying who's calling would
Mm.
have stopped it, period. Right? Um,
Just
it would be
MFA on the
very,
phone.
yeah, yeah, using Microsoft Authenticator or using Duo or SMS, right? Like we make it very easy for people to transact in a way that they are familiar with, right? So if you're gating your entire company behind Azure AD, right? We at Traceless believe that Azure is a pretty solid identity
Mm.
solution, right?
Mm.
So we're going to utilize that to verify the callers that are calling into your help desk, right? Very easily. It takes a second. It's very frictionless for the users. And
Mm.
at that point, the door would have been closed, right?
Wow.
The other side of attacks is like really about, okay, once somebody's in your ecosystem, they find crumbs, right? Crumbs of information. And those crumbs lead to other crumbs. And I feel like that's really how any attack has severe impact, right? Is that people find data and exfiltrate it. People find data to ransom and gain control, right? And that's kind of every attack is like that, right? So I think if people keep their nose clean from a perspective of sensitive information, there's just less stuff for hackers to find. And
Mm.
that's kind of how we think about security. Like we're a security company focused on how do I secure environments and systems. And those are our paradigms that we have at Traceless.
Hmm. So if that were to happen and Traceless was set up, when that end user, bad guy called, the help technician would be on your platform and would then verify that user.
Yeah, it just be built into the ticketing system. It's
Wow.
easy. Like I think there's also something about like making technology very easy and making users like giving
Mm.
users to make a better decision. And again, like there's always the human element, and training and managing people is probably one of the most difficult things. I think humans will also be the weakest link forever.
Right.
So there's no like foolproof anything because humans, right? It's
Mm.
kind of like, hey, how do I prevent 100% people will not exfiltrate data? For me, someone can take a picture of a screen with their cell phone, right? They can use a pen and a piece of paper and write down information, right? There's no 100%, but you can not be negligent,
Mm.
right? And I think that that's also, Joe, like whenever MSPs are in a very challenging situation, it's easy. It's nice to say, hey, we deflected this problem. But if you didn't, for whatever reason, because the threat landscape is constantly changing and things are crazy, like the threats continue to evolve. There's no 100% foolproof anything, right? Showing that you have not been negligent, right? And showing that you did your diligence to protect the customer in your workflow is kind of like all you can ask for, really. And that's also like our tooling is very much focused on leaving audit trails so that
Mm.
people have, and we've had feedback from customers like, hey, we got deposed. We had this audit trail. Thank you. Right.
Wow.
So it's, which is great because that was the deal, right? It's like,
Right.
I was like, holy shit, the MSP space is at risk. Like I need to do something here, right? It was a real call to action. And I feel like that was the whole thing is like, how can I help people protect themselves or their businesses?
Hmm. Gene, you're part of the ConnectWise PitchIt program, an incubator, 25 vendors. There's some training involved. There's a contest where you could win some money there in November. What's your goal from the program and how do you like it so far?
Yeah, I think that the space generally could use a little bit more
Hmm.
um, programs. So I commend PitchIt for continuing to do and invest in innovation in the space. And I think that the ConnectWise has taken it ever more serious as the years go on and produce more polished results with companies that are getting better resources to build better tooling for the ecosystem. And so I think they, yeah, I'm obviously a pretty big advocate of Pitch It, right? We won. That award was very helpful. I've made a lot of community friends and allies and learned a lot. And it's the same thing. Joe, this is what's interesting about. I was having this conversation with another vendor where the MSP space can be difficult because everybody knows each other, right? So
Hmm.
that's like double-edged sword, right? It can be really great, or it can kind of feel like gossipy and weird,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And but that's like a very special part of the space is that like if you want to know what's going on in the MSP space, you could probably go to 2 events a year and really have your finger on the pulse,
Hmm.
right? And like let's think about that for mid-market IT. Where do you go?
Yeah.
What is the soul of mid-market IT? What's the heartbeat there, right?
Yeah.
There is none
That's a good
that
point.
represents the entire
That's a
community.
good point. Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we take it for granted how incredible this space is. And I think there's a lot of value there also.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, it's a big community, but really small at the same time. And yeah, I
Yeah.
guess that's got good and bad. But ConnectWise does a really good job with Pitchit, Sean Lardo, and team over there, and really, really excited to see what happens this year. So, Gene, I started my MSP in the '90s, just a little bit older than you, and I was working
Mm-hmm.
way too hard. And we both have a passion for eating, but perhaps I was abusing it a bit and I wasn't exercising and I was eating poorly and drinking too much soda and got myself up to 340 pounds. The doctor said to me, if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. My daughter was just born at the time. So I took the next 6, 7 months, lost about 130 pounds. People always ask me how they want some quick answer. And I just say discipline, right? I got some routine and some willpower, some order, some control, etc. How does discipline play a role in your life, Gene Rich?
Man, that's a tough one. I think that uh, for me, there's like a few types of discipline, right? I think it can mean different things, right? So discipline is like I floss my teeth every night before I brush them, religiously. Every night I do that, right? Or I wake up and I drink water with lemon and then I have coffee. Or I only drink alcohol on Fridays, but only 2 drinks, right? There's that kind of regimented discipline, right? And I think that that's one area. I think that like the other part of discipline feels like tenacity, right? Because like when you're in, like, I don't know if you've ever heard any podcasts or web clips around David Goggins.
Of
You ever
course.
know that guy?
Of
Right.
course.
So he's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think he says some very truthful, like you can't get more real and truthful to how he kind of expresses things. And one of the things that I guess I learned not from him, but he clarified the way to encapsulate it with words is that, you know, the real work is when you're in the suck. Right. So the work, and I think that is discipline, right? That's what entrepreneurs, that's that grit. That's like when you're just down and out and you got to put one foot in front of the other and you know that it's possible to achieve things, but at that moment you don't think anything is possible. That's discipline for me, right? That's how I feel like I've found success in taking those moments and fighting through them. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in my MSP life I was like, oh, this is getting too hard. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm just going to get a job. I'm just going to roll into work, make a few $100,000 a year, you know, like leave at 5.
It's nice.
Do the same. Yeah. I mean, and just have that kind of thing. And every time I wanted to do that, I didn't. And I'm glad and grateful for the opportunity to be constantly challenged and to be unsuccessful. And you know, I think that's like it's really interesting. I think a lot of people, because of social media, really and media in general, right? They really only hear about somebody at their peak, right? And I think that like that doesn't set the expectation right for people who want similar things or want to achieve similar things. And it's really about showing up every day and putting one foot in front of the next, right? And when you take a foot backwards the next day, make sure you try to move it forwards, even if it's an inch. Yeah, that's for me. That's discipline. Yeah, and congrats on your health journey. I feel like I was talking to Jay Rauersy, who's a lovely. He used to lead the security sales for ConnectWise. Before that, he had a company called Carver. He sold it to Continuum. He's had just his pedigree is amazing. Wow. Nicest guy, and he was on the road all the time, right? And I didn't go to IT Nation Secure this year, but I saw a picture of him with Jason McGee on LinkedIn. It's like, holy shit, man. You took your health seriously. Congratulations. Right. And I think that there's a lot of people in the space, and it's hard. It's hard to take that seriously, right? Because it's hard. It's hard work, right? And traveling all the time, it doesn't necessarily like set you up for success, right? And I hope there's somebody listening who's working their entire life as an MSP owner who decides to think about the importance of their health and just tries and gets a glimpse of what's possible through your work. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, the life work balance is incredible and or important. And Yeah, just looking at yourself. It's interesting you bring up David Goggins, who has a very kind of militant. I mean, he's an ex-Marine, I think even a SEAL, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, he's got a very kind of militant view of discipline and runs 30 miles in a, I mean, very, very I get a lot of pushback, Gene. I like to have musicians on. I'm a big, I like music and play a little bit. And sometimes I get pushback from this. No, I don't want to be on the podcast. I have nothing to do with discipline. I'm anti-discipline, and there's no wrong answer, right? It's whether you look at it, like you say, I believe it's a spectrum. That's an ongoing thesis of mine. But even to play a musical instrument still needs a bit of discipline, I would think. And not
Mm-hmm.
being disciplined is actually a part of discipline. It's a whole gray area, but I love talking about it, and I love getting perspective on it, especially yours. What motivates you, Gene?
Mm. It's a good question. Um, well, I mean, I'm at a stage in life where I need to provide for people,
Yeah.
right? I think that that's a big part of motivation. Um, I think that the um, seeing out some things with my MSP that I always wanted, right? So that's motivating. Um, Getting it to a place where I can have people doing things that I'm horrible at.
Mm.
That was like, I knew one day I would get there, and I'm there. And I think that that allows me time and space to do what I think I'm good at and what I like doing. Right. And I think that that's just also a really difficult part of owning a business, right? Is that so many times you're like, oh, I studied marketing in college. Okay, great. And I got a job at this big company doing a marketing thing. Well, then I found out I really liked SEO. I didn't like, oh no, now I'm on Twitter and I think I'm good. No, actually, you know what? I'm going to go back to paid advertising, right? It's kind of a related thing to marketing, right? So you have this career experience, and you have all this
Mm.
support and embrace to build your career, find out what you like, get really good at one thing, go deep. And I think as a business owner, oftentimes we are deprived of that luxury,
Hmm.
right? Because guess what? You got to make payroll. Guess what? You got to understand legal enough so that you don't get screwed.
Yeah.
You got to be empathetic to somebody's personal life because they just had something come up, and guess what? That's your only option, is to deal with that and support that. Oh, you got to be technical. Oh, you got to understand insurance as well, right? You got to do sales and marketing, right? To some extent. And I think that that's, in hindsight, beautiful. I've learned so much, but at the same time, I don't think I've been good at something in the way that other people in their careers, the people in their 40s, have been good at things.
Hmm.
So for me, yeah, I'm happy. So that motivates me to continue on that. And life experience and legacy, I think, is becoming a little bit more top of mind. And it's always been superficially in the perimeter of my, oh yeah, I get legacy, planning, blah blah blah. But as you get older, people get older, they die, friends die, tragedy happens. You see how fast kids get older, and you realize, man, I don't have much time to do what I want to do here, right?
Hmm.
And I think that really motivates me to continue to focus and do what I'm doing.
So, given that motivation, you talked about, providing and legacy and kind of security and impact, it would seem that I just kind of discerned from what you said. How do you measure success?
Um, I think that there are few obvious ones, and then there's not not obvious ones,
Mm.
right? And I think that the obvious ones are what people socialize. Like I was saying before, we get this messaging from social media, and we get, you know stories, and it's like, oh, this person's a billionaire. They started in the garage. That's what everyone should do. And so obviously, like, success falls around finances, right? And providing. It falls around running a business that's responsible for my investors and for my employees, right? Being able to provide for my family and spend time with my family is also a way I define success. And I think that, my father, he did the best he could, like we were talking about earlier. And I think he actually set my life up so that I could have more time with my children. Right. And he's passed, so he'll never know that. He'll never see it. But I think that that's like, I don't take that lightly. I think success is getting through a week, getting through a day sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'll take it, right? I think that that's the other thing that I've found of, like, when you're owning a business and it's dynamic, it's not just going to be roses all the time. And you have to learn to find success in things that don't have precise alignment to money or something that's necessarily tangible. It could be, hey, somebody got a certification and I've wanted that person to get certified. That's success right there, right? Hey, I had a blocker and I got unblocked. That's success, right? And I think, in the MSP, we're looking at, like, growth and the future, and what what I socialized in our last, we have a really lovely implementer, and we do EOS, and I start off the meetings kind of talking about the state of the company and where we're going and what's happened. And, this last time was really about stacking the power of stacking good decisions, right? And that's how a success is made in my mind. It's like, you make a good decision to fire somebody or to bring in a vendor to help you with something, right? And then that decision yields fruit that is a step forward to a greater path of success. And it's sometimes hard to really link all those things over the years. But I was, trying to just acknowledge how many good things we've done in such a short period of time, and how that's yielded actual success in many ways that are measurable, is just, again, stacking up good decisions, right? And I think that is something I'm just focused on a lot in my work life, right? And I think it feels a little lighter, if I'm being honest with you.
It does. How come?
The path to success is not a straight line. Right. So if you realize that, and it goes up and down and up and down, and as long as your line is, like, going in that, right, when you're going like this, you can still look for something that's good in that challenge or that downturn, because you're going like this long term, right? The trend line is really, and sometimes the trend line changes direction, and that's that's part of it too, right? You got to figure that out. But I think that, like, that's why, right, is the experience. Also, it's the experience of having that and building the callus as a founder to go through all those things, and just realize that that's part of the work that we do. It's been, yeah, like I said, it's felt a lot lighter, right?
Good for you.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, good for
Only
you.
took me 19 years, Joe. It's straight up,
But you've got 3 kids? 3 kids under 5. God bless you.
Life is full.
Yes, it is. Gene, I love, thanks so much for your time. I love talking to MSPs. I love talking to MSPs that create solutions for other MSPs as well.
Thank you.
It's really refreshing, and God, I love it. If anybody's listening, how can they get in touch with you?
So hit me up on LinkedIn. Traceless.com for all things security, point.co if you have Apple questions. And I always offer this, and some people take me up on it, right? And it's funny because I helped a friend the other day with something with his divorce. He was just in a bad place, man, which is having those feelings,
Happens.
totally fair, right?
Happens, yeah.
But how can you think clearly when you're in such a hard place? And he took my advice, and I was just like trying to help him. And I told him I was just so grateful to hear that my advice helped him
Nice.
because, as an MSP owner, you're paid to give advice.
Right.
And a lot of times people pay you and don't take your advice, right? And so, in the spirit of peers and growing through our community, I always say, like, if you have a problem with Apple and you want to ask a question, just call me, email me. Like I will help you. Like people help me learn about P&Ls, right? I will refer you to vendors. Like somebody referred me to ConnectWise back in the day, right? Like it's that's what's great, right? It's like I got to keep it going in the community, and most people don't take advantage of that. So that just do it if that appeals to you.
Absolutely, yeah. It is a pretty good sense of community in the MSP community. We generally try to help each other. I think. Gene, thanks so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you probably at IT Nation.
Yeah, and I was going to just plug it one more time.
Please.
If you're going to be there, you better show up to the PitchIt. It's every year the space physically that they've allocated for people to come and support this whole endeavor has grown.
Yeah.
So come have a drink some water, drink some beer, drink nothing, but just support the program because it's really is for us as a community to help innovation, and I think everyone should get behind that.
Absolutely, and I'll be there this year as I always am, rooting everybody on. Gene, thanks so much for your
Yeah,
time
Joe.
today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations.